Me saying that making this video won't be weird would make me about as honest as that man.
Watch out! Behind you!
Because yeah, it will be extremely weird to make. In my 14 videos up to this point, I am usually extremely positive because I have a great time with the games, right? And in the case of Chapter 1, it's not that it's bad, but there's a lot that I want to talk about, and it's not all sunshine and rainbows. So let's not waste any time and get right to it. Also a quick reminder to watch my other video on the prologue first for the full context. It will be in the description. I guess I'm going to start with what was probably my biggest disappointment in Chapter 1. I remember reading a comment about that particular issue on the prologue video, and I have to agree with it because I hate the combat now. To be fair, I do kind of enjoy the feel of combat, but what I absolutely hate is the design of many of the enemies. A lot of them feel unfair or simply poorly balanced, and I know that it's easy to start complaining when things get a little bit hard, but I've really tried to be careful here and think about it in depth, and I think that my main issue doesn't even have to do with the level of difficulty itself, but rather the ways in which it is difficult. Like, for some examples, the Queen of Endregas, if I remember correctly, her attacks, I couldn't even really avoid them unless I was behind her. Or another example would be Letho having a shield that means that like 60% of the time or something like that was basically me waiting for an opening to even start playing the game, and I'm sure that there are some tricks to make it easier, maybe use bombs, signs, etc, but still, I must say that I'm not a fan of how the fights are designed. I made the decision to lower the difficulty now, from hard to normal, and I guess we'll see how it feels moving forward. Another thing that this chapter suffered from, in my opinion, is visual repetitiveness. I get that a forest is a forest, but I still feel like the variety was a bit disappointing, all things considered, especially when compared to the prologue. Here instead, you end up walking at the same places many times. Maybe you killed bandits the first time and now it's empty. Maybe you've explored all of it already as well. Basically, it makes me appreciate the open world of Witcher 3 even more, that's for sure. Also, I'd say that when they had opportunities to do something visually distinct, like for instance the elven structures, sure Triss says this,
"Elves possess a sensitivity humans can't ever hope to acquire."
But I disagree. I feel like what she is saying does not really reflect what's on my screen. Considering how epic elven ruins are supposed to look, I would say that once again it's a pretty bland location considering what it could have been. The forest was also pretty difficult to navigate, with frequent dead ends and a lot of obstacles that you needed to climb. Following characters like Zoltan or Roche is basically a nightmare. They're so slow and often they just stop walking. Also in towns you have doors everywhere, slowing you down even more. Again, none of this is extremely important or significant, but when you put all of it together, I think that navigating this chapter was not that enjoyable, and the prologue did not really suffer from these problems because we were constantly making progress and seeing new locations instead of doing some back and forth in the same forest areas. Now, the saving grace of this chapter, despite the flaws, because of that I still had a good time, and it's because of the story and its characters, which thankfully might be the most important thing for me. I can ignore a lot of the flaws if you can keep me interested in your characters and your story, and this chapter definitely did that, despite some rough dialogue at times, things like Roche explaining who controls the forest.
What about roads through the forest?
Iorveth rules the forest. Where are we?
In a forest?
Very funny. But who does it belong to?
Iorveth, maybe?
Also, I can't even begin to describe how out of character Geralt saying this about the Karen feels to me.
I can't wait. I bet it's something spectacular.
Or even this situation with the mighty Scoia'taels who conveniently let Geralt in because he figured out their plan and knows where other Scoia'taels are hiding.
Iorveth won't talk with you.
The two of you won't scare us off.
There are 4 more in that tree.
How do you know? Wait at the clearing. The dwarf knows where. We'll let Iorveth know.
I'm not sure that's how Scoia'taels would actually react, but at least bad moments like these were not too frequent. So yeah, to talk about the story, the segment around the Karen felt a bit more like a side quest that's actually a main quest. I know that that fight in particular seems to be quite controversial in the Witcher community, but I have to admit that gameplay-wise I didn't really have a problem with it, maybe because it didn't take me too long and I figured it out quite quickly, which was probably helped by the fact that it wasn't my first time playing the game. If anything, I might have a problem with the fact that the prologue had a dragon and now chapter 1 is this massive Karen, With the dragon alone, I thought it was okay, but now it seems pretty obvious that they prioritize epicness over what would be more likely to happen in the actual world of The Witcher based on the books, for example, or even Witcher 1 to be honest, and I guess now we'll see if it remains true for the rest of the game or not. At least this whole situation around the Cairn was a nice way to introduce the characters and the locations before getting to the core of the story in this chapter, which is really about Iorveth and Letho, Flotsam and the Scoia'taels, and the choice between Roche and Iorveth. I also can't forget to mention that there are great bits of development for Geralt and Triss, as Geralt keeps remembering more and more of his past, and he actually has a vision of Yennefer and Ciri, which probably was very exciting for those who had read the books before playing. Clearly he knows that they were important to him, but he can't really figure out more about it or why. And this chapter also comes very close to fixing Geralt's memory issues completely with the Rose of Remembrance, but in the end it doesn't happen, which is a bit disappointing of course. I will say though that with these visions and memories coming back, in my mind, Geralt must be incredibly troubled and lost right now. That's why I think that he would have a hard time loving Triss in this situation, or at least committing fully to the relationship. Not so much because he has no feelings towards her, but just because his main priority should be to figure out who he really is, and most of his energy and brain power is probably going towards that. And of course this whole situation is not easy for Triss.
You know why Eldon and Cynaril resisted all and stayed together?
Why?
Because they're statues. Just statues.
Now the story between Letho and Iorveth is interesting. Geralt figures out that Letho is kind of done with Iorveth, which leads to an interesting scene, and I must say that when you put Iorveth and Letho on my screen, my eyes are glued to said screen. But now, it leads to the question, would Geralt fight Letho? I don't even know if the fight can be avoided in the end, but after doing all of that, up to this point in the story, I doubt that Geralt wouldn't fight him. Not because he has something against Letho personally. Actually, I don't think he has anything personally against Letho, but because he kinda has to in that situation. He shouldn't be in the situation that he is currently in, a presumed Kingslayer, which is fully a result of Leto's actions, and it doesn't really matter what Leto's motives or excuses are. I think it's just the normal consequences of his actions, really. Now the elephant in the room, another big decision, probably bigger than the last one, Roche or Iorveth. And I didn't really struggle to make my choice, even if it's a big one. I think that the main reason to choose Iorveth is because he seems like a cool character, or maybe for someone who enjoys the elves and their cause. But it's true, you know? Iorveth is a cool character, definitely entertaining, but I don't think that his motives really line up with the ones of Geralt, and it just makes sense in my mind that Geralt would keep going with Roche. We've seen and heard a fair bit about Iorveth, but most of what Geralt has heard about him is not that great, and he basically knows nothing about him. Maybe on a surface level, sure, but he doesn't really truly know the man enough to commit to a plan with him. Maybe if he had no choice, but he has a choice here, right? You could say similar things about Roche actually, and that Geralt doesn't really know him well. At least with Roche, Roche earned the respect of a man that Geralt, I think, respects to a certain degree. Full test. And I simply struggle to find anything similar that would be an argument in favor of Iorveth. So that pretty much explains my decision. Make sure to tell me in the comments what was your decision and why. I really want to know. Now let's move on and talk about something that I thought The Witcher 1 did incredibly well and that the prologue also excelled at in my opinion, and it's the music and ambience. In this chapter, for me, it largely went unnoticed for the most part, which is probably a bad thing considering that it's usually a highlight of my experience. Flotsam is a town with a leader that's ready to abuse his power for personal gains, and it's also a town with strong tensions between humans and non-humans, which is made worse with the presence of the Scoia'taels outside the walls, but overall I think Flotsam's ambience and music at times depicted well this unsafe feeling, but it was kind of hit or miss depending on the time of the day. I also want to give an honorable mention to the Claws of Madness side quest. For these videos, I usually ignore most of the side content because otherwise it's gonna take me 2 months to make a video instead of a month, which is already pretty bad. But that quest was recommended to me by a friend, and I must say that it was a nice recommendation because it pretty much contained everything that you want from a Witcher quest with an interesting story and great ambience. It also rewarded exploration very well, and it contained a difficult choice to make. The full package, really. And frankly, if Witcher 2 wasn't that old and there was an audience for it, I'd probably make a separate video just for that quest alone because it was that good.
Corpseman, remember how I was torn apart bit by bit? Remember what you did with the people of this house.
You deceived us!
Crimes require punishment.
Before wrapping things up, I still want to talk about some more story moments that I enjoyed. Let's begin with the first one that comes to my mind, and it's probably the death of Laredo and his character arc overall throughout the chapter.
I'd like to report. Out of my sight, Clover.
He was entertaining, annoying, and pleasant to kill, which is probably a good sign of good writing if you make me hate your villain. I think that Cedric's death is quite nice as well, with the animals of the forest visiting him before dying.
The forest. I feel a presence.
Same thing with the whole sequence at the end with Moril's death and Saharim getting her baby. It was all great, although it could have been even better if Saharim's character had been developed a bit more. Maybe there was some side content with him, I can't really say, but still it was enjoyable.
What about the kid?
Saharim. Take it to Saharim in Lobenden.
Alright, that pretty much covers everything I wanted to talk about. To finally answer the question in the title, can Witcher 2 keep impressing me? Not really. As I discussed in the video, my experience was overall still positive, but following the prologue, I was definitely impressed, and I think that chapter 1 doesn't quite live up to that, while still bringing interesting things to the table, and a lot of the flaws were gameplay related. With that being said, I'm looking forward to what comes next in the game, and I can't wait to get started with chapter 2. Thank you so much for making it to the end, I really hope you enjoyed, and I will be back soon with more Witcher 2 videos. In the meantime though, you can look forward to another video that will be coming soon, basically a channel update video. I will discuss a bunch of topics, like an update on the videos on the Witcher books. Also, I'm going to be talking about everything that I've learned over my first 14-15 videos and how that's going to impact the channel and just my videos moving forward. I'm also going to talk about my schedule plans for the future and a lot more stuff like that. Please consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video if you enjoyed. I'll see y'all soon in a new video. Bye bye.